At the southern edge of the Pantanal, sightings of this small wild cat have hit a new high. The ocelot is making a major comeback. Howler monkeys, toucans, and deer all call this place home. Yet none of them is prey for this stealthy hunter. So scientists struggle to understand the ocelot's success. The Pantanal is a tropical wetland where all life is defined by the seasons. From October to March, it's the rainy season. By April, 80% of the land disappears under more than 3 feet of water. Come the dry season, the water recedes. Late September. It hasn't rained for months. The landscape is parched, and the food is scarce for the animals that live here. Yet the dramatic ebb and flow of the seasons help wildlife. It's prevented the development of large-scale industrial agriculture. The Pantanal is 10 times larger than the Everglades and spans 3 countries, mostly in Brazil. It's a pristine place where wildlife still rules. But here at its southern edge, a relatively small farm has carved a slice out of the wetlands and turned it into a rice plantation. Most environmentalists don't believe that conservation and agriculture are a good mix. But ecologist Enrique Concone noticed the local wildlife seems to have embraced the change.
What is a very interesting thing about the irrigation rice process here is that most of this water that is irrigating the rice on the ranch is exactly on the dry season. So you have a very unique situation where during the dry season, most of the Pantanal is dry, but here you can see some portion of land with a lot of water, which will attract a lot of wildlife.
Enrique is working on a PhD, and his focus is the ocelot, also known as the dwarf leopard. It's South America's fiercest small cat.
Aqui já é macho, bem característico, bem grande, um bicho mais forte, dá para ver o testículo. E essa padronagem está muito boa para
Like all wildcat species, ocelot populations are declining due to habitat loss. But on this farm, the species seems to be thriving.
Olha que legal. Dá para saber que é uma fêmea porque ela tá a mama bem entumecida, então é sinal de que ela tá lactante. Isso é legal mesmo.
In Brazil, there are 9 species of wildcats. Of those 9 species, 7 are considered small cats. Among those 7 species of small cats, the ocelot is the largest one. They can attain a little bit more than 1 meter in length from tip of the nose, tip of the tail. And big males will weigh up to 15 kilos. It's a cat that is heavily spotted with stripes also on the side. So for many, it's considered one of the most beautiful cats in the world.
The best time to spot an ocelot is at night, when the small cats use the cover of darkness to hunt. Two years ago, on a similar nocturnal survey, Enrique nicknamed the area Cat Country.
Foi onde eu realmente fiquei pouco espantado com a quantidade de jaguatirica que a gente via nessa área. Trabalhei num outro lugar, fiquei 2 anos e devo ter visto 10 em 2 anos. E de repente aqui a gente saía numa noite e conseguia ver 5, 6 indivíduos diferentes numa mesma saída.
Finding out why this was an ocelot hotspot is the focus of Enrique's doctoral research. It seemed counterintuitive, but could man-made landscapes, if done well, actually help wildlife? His goal is to understand if and how humans and wildlife can coexist. A family of capybaras is caught in the headlights. Traffic is unusual in these parts. They're all safely across the road and disappear into the darkness. Just down the road, the spotlight reveals a female maned wolf and her 3 playful pups. At about 3 feet tall, the mother looks like a fox on stilts, but they are neither foxes nor wolves. They're the tallest wild canid in the world, a family that includes domestic dogs. Their hunting grounds are Brazil's grasslands known as the Cerrado, where their long legs give them a distinct edge. The team continues into the heart of cat country. And it's not long before they find what they're looking for.
Olha lá o bicho. Bobinho. Não, jogou a tirica, olha a tirica.
Aí você mantém a luz ali.
It's a young female. And she does not care much for the paparazzi that have invaded her territory.
Tá vendo ali? Ela baixou ali, escondeu ali.
The white fur around her eyes reflects light into her pupils and enhances her powerful night vision. She quietly withdraws into the bush. Enrique goes on these night spotting missions once a week. The more sightings, the more data he can use to prove his theory. Deeper in the forest, the glare of the spotlight catches another ocelot. A male this time. Ocelots mark their territory by rubbing against trees and bushes. In this region, their home range is up to 3 square miles. Females have smaller territories, and he likely has several living in his. He patrols his entire home range every few days in search of prey. Ocelots don't stalk their prey. They either patiently wait and ambush whatever happens to pass by, or they follow scent trails. This male seems to be onto something. He doesn't know it, but he's being observed by another male. This one has been lucky and carries the bloody traces of a fresh kill on his fur. A yellow anaconda. The hungry cat ripped off the snake's head to avoid a deadly embrace. And he's not about to let another cat claim his prize. Ocelot males, like females, are fiercely territorial. The anaconda is a prize worth defending. It will feed a hungry cat for several days. The intruder moves in. The message is loud and clear, and the intruder moves on. The successful hunter drags his unwieldy dinner into the forest to dine in peace. The night is still young for the nocturnal ocelots, but for Enrique, it's time for bed. Not a record-breaking night for the most ocelot sightings, but some amazing behavior. Dawn returns to cat country. The night crowd retreats. And the forest awakens to the calls of its diurnal inhabitants. The loudest of them all is the howler monkey. They're the loudest land animals in the Western Hemisphere. Their booming calls can be heard 3 miles away. Both sexes call. But today, it's the dominant male that notifies other groups of their position. A mother and her infant start their day dining on flowers. They're called black howler monkeys, even though they're all born a golden brown. Only the males turn black when they mature. This young juvenile will be covered in black fur by the time he's 2.5 years old. Unlike most South American monkeys, both male and female howler monkeys have color vision. So if it's not the scent of these ipe flowers, it may be their bright pink color that attracts these primates. One thing's for sure, it's quite a treat. One that only happens in the middle of the dry season. Right after it drops its leaves, the ipe tree produces large clusters of beautiful flowers. The flowers are nutritious and much sought after. Howlers have a prehensile tail that has no fur underneath. It makes a great fifth limb. The youngster strikes out on his own. He soon finds out plucking flowers is not as easy as it looks, even with the help of his tail. Especially at the end of the flowering season, when the bright pink prize is hard to reach. A few branches away, a southern-crested caracara eyes the young howler with interest. Luckily for the young howler, this raptor is a scavenger. The rest of the troop is always on the lookout for predators, especially for raptors. The opportunistic caracara has spotted an easier target. On a nearby tree, a savanna hawk enjoys the catch of the day. The caracara tries to force the hawk to drop its food. These winged bullies are fiercely territorial. And aren't afraid to tell other birds to take a hike. Especially at this time of year, when farm workers prepare the fields for new rice crops. As the plow churns up the soil, it unearths worms, lizards, and insects living underground. Lined up at the banquet table, the steely-eyed raptors stand watch, ready to sweep in for a quick meal. The seasonal flooding of the Pantanal means that the land isn't very productive. That and the scarcity of roads keep the human population low. Farms are large and widely dispersed. On this farm, some of the land has been set aside as an official natural preserve. And that's the part Enrique calls cat country.
Então, aqui a gente está cruzando, a gente está numa estrada fazenda aqui do meu lado esquerdo. Começam as áreas de lavoura. Do lado direito a gente tem as áreas de Pantanal nativo. Agora eu tô indo para campo colocar umas câmeras, umas armadilhas fotográficas.
Enrique sets the camera traps up at many different locations.
Então aqui, o que eu faço? Eu tiro uma reta mais ou menos na altura do qualquer animal, mais ou menos essa altura aqui, vai ser registrado. O foco é a jaguatirica, a gente espera.
The snapshots he collects will help him establish ocelot density in the area.
Então aqui a distância tá boa, a altura tá boa. Agora é só ligar e esperar, né? Agora tem que esperar.
Enrique's research could provide a glimpse of what can be done to help wildlife in farmed areas.
E um passo segundo é passar então a capturar algumas jaguatiricas, aparelhar elas com radiocolares e monitorar a movimentação delas dentro da área para a gente entender como é que elas estão fazendo o uso desse espaço.
The GPS data will help Enrique determine the ocelot's home range, how long and how far they travel, and more importantly, how they use the native forest compared to the rice fields. For now, he's still busy collecting hard evidence.
Isso é bem típico de fezes de jaguatirica, que a gente pode fuçar um pouco e vai ver que é muito pelo. Toda essa parte que não digere, ela digere praticamente só a parte do tecido mole, osso e pelo, passa direto pelo trato digestivo, né? Tem bastante ossinho, né? Aqui a gente já viu dentição, maxilar, pequenos roedores. É bem o que a gente vê em geral aqui nessa região, né?
Ocelots have to eat about 2 pounds of food a day. Usually, only 50% of an ocelot's diet is rodents.
Ocelots, they have a very broad diet, and they can prey upon birds, lizards, snakes, and small and medium-sized mammals. I've been able to check that they can prey upon also brocketeer and rheas, but most of their diet, through this analysis of scat, we have found that up to 80% or more of their diet is composed by small rodents.
The ocelots here are eating 30% more small rodents in their diet. That's a big difference. It's because they live near a rice plantation. That's what Pedro Estrella suspects. He's a rodent expert.
One of the first things we want to study is the diversity of rodents in agricultural systems or agroecosystems. The diversity can be measured by the number of species that are found, but also by their abundance, which means the number of individuals of each species that are found. So this can be a good measure of how an agricultural ecosystem has impacted a natural ecosystem.
Even native species of rodents have a downside. They make great hosts for parasites. And that's why Fabiana Lopez Rocha is interested in the project. She's a parasitology expert.
Parasites, they are part of the ecosystem. They act as a force of population regulation. The problem is when we alter the environment, so we change the relationships between parasites and their hosts, and this can lead to an increase of the prevalence of some diseases and cause outbreaks.
For ocelots, one of the most dangerous parasites is Trypanosoma cruzi, which in humans causes Chagas disease. If an ocelot eats a rodent that carries this parasite, it gets infected.
Trypanosoma cruzi causes heart failure, which can affect the life expectancy and also capacity of locomotion and capacity of predation, which can be a huge problem for a predator.
A gente está colocando as armadilhas bem perto desse canal de drenagem e num local onde tem herbáceas, arbustos. A gente espera que aqui concentre a maior parte dos bichos, né?
As night falls upon cat country, swarms of mosquitoes take to the dark skies. It's time for Pedro and Fabiana to set out their traps. They use peanut butter as bait. Fabiana notes the trap locations with a GPS.
Isso é importante tanto para a gente encontrar as armadilhas, quanto para a gente saber a distribuição espacial dos roedores que caírem nelas. Aqui eu estou marcando com fita o local da armadilha. Principalmente uma matinha mais fechada assim, é difícil enxergar mesmo com o GPS.
They'll be back in the morning to check out the traps. What they find may shed new light on what makes this place cat country.
Olha o jacarezinho aqui.
Ah, filhote. Pô, se pegasse um desse na armadilha. Vem cá, pega.
Back on the road, Enrique looks for more clues. A crescent moon barely lights up the night sky. A perfect night for ocelots to hunt and for ocelot sightings. But it's a giant anteater that Enrique sees first. These peaceful and exotic-looking creatures have the lowest body temperature of any mammal, about 91 degrees Fahrenheit. They're active mostly at dawn or dusk and feast on insects. Next, a marsh deer steps into the spotlight. They graze on aquatic plants. But they'll also browse the shrubbery. It's a pair of crab-eating foxes that really catches Enrique's attention. Foxes and ocelots compete for some of the same kinds of prey. They do eat a lot of crabs, as their name suggests, but this one has a rodent that it probably caught in the rice paddies. A little further into the bush, a female ocelot is on the prowl. She spotted something off the ground. It could be a bird nest with some tasty eggs or chicks inside. No luck this time. It's a termite nest. It's the start of the mating season, a crucial time for ocelots. Females only have 1 or 2 kittens every other year. This one leaves a message. Her pungent urine warns other females to stay away. And lets males know she's ready to mate. Another female is lactating and has left her kittens in a safe place while she hunts. She'll nurse them for only 6 weeks, but will continue to provide them with food for a few months before teaching them to hunt. For Enrique, all this female activity is a good omen, a sign that a new generation of ocelots will soon make its home in cat country. As the sun rises over the Pantanal, the howler monkeys once again gather for breakfast. By now, there are no more flowers on the trees. So they settle for the green leaves. Although howler monkeys are one of the largest monkeys in the Americas, they mostly subsist on leaves. Older leaves are not that nutritious, so they have to spend most of the day foraging. In another tree, a toucan is considering a breakfast of fruits. There are 20 species of toucans in Brazil, and this toco toucan is the largest of them all. The bill can sometimes grow as long as the bird's body, and although it looks massive, the bill is hollow and light. It isn't just beautiful, it also works as an adjustable thermal radiator that a toucan can use to warm and cool itself. Although these toucans spend a lot of time in trees, they're not very good at flying. They travel among trees by hopping. When they do take flight, they flap their wings vigorously, then glide, traveling only short distances. This toucan spots a genipapo tree full of ripe fruits. The beak does all the work. Its sharp saw-like edges tear the fruit's shell right off and expose the juicy flesh. On the ground, the rice fields undergo a dramatic transformation. Now that the soil has been tilled and the seeds sown, water from the nearby Miranda River begins to flow. Channeled by a series of man-made dikes into the parched fields, turning an arid plain into a shimmering wetland. The water attracts a flock of waders. The bare-faced ibises are eager to feast on the insects, worms, and other small invertebrates, forced out of the ground by the water. But they dine at a leisurely pace. It's a gregarious species, unlike its cousin, the plumbeous ibis, which prefers the barefaced company to its own kind. Elegant black-necked stilts and lesser yellowlegs delicately probe the mud for smaller prey. A snail kite snatches up an apple snail shell. but soon drops it. Someone else has already eaten the snail. Caracara are here too. Always first in line for a free meal. Even a jabiru, one of the world's largest birds, has joined the feeding waders. The manufactured landscape of the rice fields doesn't deter the wildlife here. This yellow anaconda takes advantage of the irrigation channels. It prefers to be in the water, so the farm dikes are like highways. This cold-blooded predator is almost 15 feet of pure muscle. It's built to crush the life out of its victims and swallow them whole. Its tongue picks up microscopic particles from the air to track its next meal. Although it's large, it has an appetite for small rodents. A field worker breaks down levees to create new pathways for the water. A process that has changed little over centuries. On this farm, they average more than 6,000 pounds of rice per acre. To achieve this, they stagger the crops. Enrique and his colleagues use this to their advantage. They've set their rodent traps in different kinds of habitats found in and near the farm fields. Each location will give them a sample of the rodent population living there. They'll be able to correlate the species they find with the different stages of rice production. There's not much growing here yet. Just young, small sprouts, a couple of weeks old.
Tá safo aí?
All the traps here are empty.
Tem muita formiga aqui.
Unless you count the ants. They seem very fond of peanut butter.
Comeram metade da isca.
This confirms Pedro's hunch.
Eu acho que os animais eles vão começar a colonizar aqui o campo de arroz quando começar a ter alimento, né? Quando começar a ter grão. Porque aqui, se você olhar, assim, a paisagem aqui não tem nem abrigo para eles, nem comida. Então, a priori, não tem nenhuma razão pela qual os roedores andem aqui, né?
The next location is a rice field that's more mature. Pedro and Fabiana have set the traps at the edge of the field, where the bush is thicker and offers more shelter.
Tá com cara de serradomes, mas da cajuenses, talvez.
It's hard to identify the exact rodent species at the bottom of the trap.
Ah, meu amigo. Se for isso que eu tô pensando, vai ser bom. Eu acho que é um holoquilos.
Ah, não.
É, tá muito bonito.
It's a species of marsh rat. It makes a lot of sense to find it here.
Mas eu acho que é um holoquilos juvenil, tá com... porque o pé dele é gigante. O pé dele é muito grande, a barriga dele é branca. Ele tem um dorso mais claro e ele tem uma cara muito fofa. É a diagnose taxonômica dele.
Adorei essa. Você vê na chave.
Vem. Se fosse uma menina, você diria... Oh!
The good news keeps coming.
Poxa, esse bicho é difícil cair nesse tipo de armadilha.
Cara, o bicho é grandão, né?
É muito grande.
This healthy specimen is a Brazilian guinea pig. It looks like a domestic guinea pig, and it might even be the same species as its wild ancestor. Out of the 39 traps set in this mature field, they capture 6 different rodents, a 15% success rate, which in the world of field science is a good day. Best part is, out of the 6 rodents captured, Pedro and Fabiana could identify 4 of the species. The other 2 will take a bit longer.
We can't draw any conclusions at the present time, but we can say that we have had a higher capture than we expected, especially in terms of diversity more than number, with a high capture success.
The biggest surprise comes when the team moves across the road to check on the traps set in the natural habitat, a forest.
Tem nada?
Nada.
But then, an interesting discovery.
Então, esses marsupiais se encontram somente na América do Sul. Não dá para ver muito bem, mas ela tem 2 manchas claras em cima dos olhos. Eu ainda não sei o quão comum isso daqui é para essa região aqui, porque é a primeira vez que a gente está fazendo um estudo aqui.
Ocelots' diets are varied, but except for the occasional anaconda, brocket deer, or rhea, they usually hunt animals that are about their size or smaller. An opossum like this one in the trap would make a fine meal for an ocelot.
We collected 1 species of marsupial of the genus Philander, 2 females. The 2 were pregnant, so we released them back into nature.
Of the 30 traps laid in the native forest of the Pantanal, Pedro only captured 2 marsupials and no rodents. It's unusual not to find any native rodents, especially when compared to the abundance of rodents trapped closer to the rice plantation. Compared to the natural forest, the habitat closer to the rice fields seems to have far more for an ocelot to eat. The forest trail cameras took photos of a magnificent female jaguar, but no ocelots this time. Even when there are lots of ocelots, they can still be elusive. But on the other side of the road, near a bridge that leads to the rice fields, Enrique has better results. It looks like it was a busy night for this mother ocelot. The camera shows her first taking a rodent to her kitten. Next, she moves her kitten, quite a large juvenile about 2 months old, to a new location. Then she goes back hunting for more food. It seems ocelots are quite at home and well fed in the transitional habitat between the cultivated land and the natural forest. As the tropical midday sun heats up the rice fields, an ocelot finds shelter in the native forest fringing the rice paddy. From its perch, it surveys its kingdom, a man-made plantation. Ocelots are considered to be a vulnerable and elusive species that prefers the dense cover of forests to open areas. It's early days, but Enrique's findings seem to challenge that. In this area, the rice fields seem to be providing plenty of rodent species that ocelots can hunt. Are the ocelots desperate or adapting well to their changing world?
This really attracted my attention because all the literature that you have from ocelots, you always will see that they need forest cover to survive. And here you are able to see ocelots using very open areas of irrigated rice fields, even when the land is naked with no plants. So it's very interesting because it shows that this species might be much more adaptable than was previously thought, which is very important to understand because you can now start to looking at human disturbed areas and understand how different wild species can survive and thrive in this kind of habitat.
Enrique's results are preliminary. They still need to know what happened to the native forest rodents and whether there will be unintended consequences for other species if there are more ocelots out hunting. It will take a lot more data to really hone in on how to achieve the right balance between agriculture and the preservation of wildlife. But Enrique is hopeful.
I have 2 boys, and I always think on my kids when I'm doing field work, and if they will be able to see what I'm seeing nowadays. For me, it's very good to notice that they're growing up in a wild area, and they're being able to see a lot of wildlife, which is, for me, very, very special and important for them.